Hello, everyone. Welcome to Academia Unplugged, a platform where real scholars talk about everything academia. It is here you hear real stories from scholars where they discuss how they navigate and scale through academia. Today, we have a very wonderful guest, Dr. Temitope Adebayo. Temi,
Hi.
you're welcome. It's
Thank
good
you
to
very
have
much. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Thank you. So, before we begin, I'm going to introduce you, and then we take it from there. So, Dr. Temitope Adebayo is an epidemiologist, a biostatistician, a public health scientist, and a health economist. She has worked previously on spatial temporal dynamic of malaria in South Africa in collaboration with the French National Institute of Health and Medical Research. So, Temi has Bachelor of Arts in International Relations and Diplomacy from the University of South Africa, Bachelor of Science in Information Technology from the University of the Free State, Bachelor of Science Honors in Biostatistics from the University of Pretoria, a Master of Science in Public Health and Environmental Health from the University of Pretoria, where she graduated in the top 5% of her class, and then a PhD in Epidemiology and Public Health from the Swiss Tropical and Public Health Institute, called the Swiss TPH, and the University of Basel. So, welcome again, Dr. Temi. I hope I got the introduction right.
Thank you very much. For a moment there, I just remember that I actually did not finish my Bachelor of Arts in International Relations and Diplomacy. I was being an overachiever at the time because I was doing that and my BSc in IT at the University of the Free State all at the same time.
Okay.
And I had to drop out of UNISA because I was doing the diplomacy one with UNISA. And so I had to drop it because I was becoming an average student, and I was like, no, I need to be excellent. And for me to be that, I need to choose one. So I went with IT. I should update that information.
Thank you very much for the clarification. So,
no problem.
Yes. They were all happening around the same time, so that is why they are still there, so I picked both of them.
Okay.
So it's good you clarified. Good. Okay, so is there anything else you'd like to say about yourself before we begin?
No, just a gentle baby girl.
Okay. Thank you very much. So, we know PhD is the love for knowledge, but I don't know for you, why did you decide to do a PhD?
Oh, that's a good question. I think on the one hand, it's because I was ambitious. Okay. On the other hand, it was also because I need to set the example in my family, because this is the highest qualification of anyone in my entire lineage. This is the first doctor, right?
Congratulations.
Thank you.
You have set the bar very high.
I had to set the bar, right. So I set the bar, but for me, it was a thing of I wanted to attain the highest qualification possible. And I knew this already, even while I was doing my undergraduate, that I was going to go all the way to PhD. What I was going to do then, even though I started with IT, computer science, I was not clear, but I knew I wanted to do it. So those were my motivations.
That's nice. Mm-hmm. So have you enjoyed it?
I did.
Even though you wanted to set the bar, you wanted to be a high achiever.
Yeah.
Did you enjoy the process and all the struggles that had to come with it?
I did. And I think if you were to ask any of my friends, they will tell you there were moments they could not believe I was doing a PhD because it just looked like I was having too much fun. But I enjoyed my PhD. Of course, it was not without its own issues and challenges, which is normal. I think even in any other regular job, there are problems or hiccups. There was that also in PhD, but it's just life. And with the right structure and the right support, I was able to get through, but I thoroughly enjoyed my PhD.
Okay. Nice, very nice. So we'll talk a little bit about the good parts and the challenges as well. Right. But for now, maybe you can speak a little bit about the subjects you did your research on, maybe for your master's or PhD.
So for my PhD, I was focused on environmental epidemiology, and then I did environmental health. So I was looking at the influence of multiple air pollutants on cardiovascular and respiratory diseases in terms of mortality and morbidity. And so I had to do an association study with using time series study design and with study that spanned about 10 years in Cape Town, South Africa. And after that, the bulk of the work, the part of the work that I'm super proud of, that I was able to contribute that to the wealth of science, was developing a global health air quality index, which is supposed to adequately capture the air quality in a specific area, which it could be anywhere in the world. So we did a global one, and we benchmarked it around an existing work that the WHO had done, a systematic review they did. So we captured the health effects that they found in those studies, and we used it to formulate our index. So I would say the work as it is still maybe a few years ahead of its time. It's not been adopted yet, but it's there for when people are ready to start using that, because at the moment most countries are still using an air quality index, which is based on a single pollutant model of looking at the highest measure of each pollutant at any time to report the index, whereas ours takes into account the additive effect as much as we could of all of the pollutants we looked at, to be able to tell people more adequately what the air quality is and what kind of risk it poses to them. So is it a low risk, a medium risk, a high risk? And it also encourages government and policymakers in a way that if at any point it starts to go above low, because then you know the susceptible people, the people who are vulnerable, the effect is going to be higher amongst them. You need to put certain measures in place to prevent that from happening. So at the moment, because people are still using air quality indices, it's not being utilized yet, but at some point they will use it. And the update of that index would always go hand in hand with what the WHO is doing. So what is relevant at the time, the most updated science at the time, would be used to update the index. So that's one work that I'm super proud of. Yeah.
That's very wonderful. So I think you have made a major contribution to epidemiology. I mean, developing air quality index. So I think that's a major contribution. So congratulations once again.
Thank you.
Yes. So I mean, this is a great job, and with great work, of course, come with many challenges.
Yeah.
So let's delve a bit, since it's Academia Unplugged, let's just look a bit into the road from the beginning to the end, where we I mean, you just told us now of a wonderful results that you got. So have you ever felt stuck on the way during your PhD?
Yeah.
So how did you navigate through that?
Let's see.
You can give context, maybe
yes.
Is it during data collection or analysis or?
Yeah.
Yes.
Glad that you brought up data collection. So data collection was a moment where it was challenging and I felt stuck. To give you a bit of insight, for my work, I had to get more like approval from the time it was called the Department of Environmental Affairs in South Africa. And I remember I traveled from Switzerland to South Africa to speak to the agency at the time, explain my work to them and help them understand why this was necessary. And I remember very clearly there was pushback from their side when they said it was the prerogative of the government to do a work like that. And so one thing I learned from that, because it went back and forth, one thing I learned from that was the art of listening, because then you hear what is not being said. And essentially what was not being said is, we want to be the one that does this work. Of course, you've identified a problem, but this is our job. Go find something else to do. And I was like, okay, how about, present it to you this way, that I am preparing or putting together the methodology that you would need to be able to do this work when you are ready to do it. So it's not that I can implement this. At the time, the scale of my work was limited to South Africa.
Yes.
Actually, Cape Town. It was limited to Cape Town. It was meant to be like, let's see if this is possible. But as things would go, it is now a global index where I don't even need their approval. But at the time, it was required, because without it, I was not going to get access to my data. Okay. And so I had to finesse and explain, no, I'm not trying to do your work. This is at the time, whenever you're ready, all of my thesis will be freely available for you to use. And then you wouldn't be starting from 0 or from 1. You'd be starting from a better place because someone else has done the work. So that was one point where I did get stuck, because I went to South Africa and the only thing that came out of it was saying, okay, yes, you can go ahead and get access to the data. That could have been an email, but it was not an email. We had to have a conversation. And then there were other parts of, the analysis, where this was something that I had never done before. And that is the nature of PhD. It's a problem, you have to figure it out, and you learn, and you hammer at the problem, you figure it out eventually. And so at the time, my work had only been done, I think we found 4 studies, of which the very first one was done in South Africa, but it was not adopted by the South African agency, by the South African air quality, the authorities and the agency at the time. So it was like trying to build on their work, but also expand on it. And that's where there was the hiccup, there was the bottleneck of how do you expand on this? And the analysis, it was, in a way, when you look at the work now, it looks like it was simple. It is simple, easy to understand, but it took a lot of work to make it that simple, because that's the thing. You also need to consider that, how do we make this accessible? You have to make science accessible. You can't come with very difficult things that it would take other people who might want to use it a long time to figure it out. So that's where the bulk of the work comes in, figuring it out to the point where you take a mountain of work and you just turn it into paperweight, and someone can see it and easily adopt it. So anywhere in the world, anybody can use that work. But it took years and hours of work and sweat to be able to get it to a point where it's easy and accessible. So those were some of the stuck moment and hiccups that I had. But I think when one knows why you're doing it in the first place, I wanted a conversation to be had around air pollution in South Africa, in Africa altogether, because we suffer the most and we contribute the least, but the measures to limit how it affects human health is not well studied, or the measures are not well established, right? So I wanted to, be part of that in a way of finding solutions. And so it was a thing of, if people knew how much air pollution was, harming their health, they could potentially modify their behavior towards it, limit your exposure. If you know today it's a low risk, then yes, go around, run your errands and all of that. But on a day where it's the risk is much higher, it's not safe, then it means maybe don't
indoors,
run. Stay indoors, or instead of running in this particular area or running for so long, because running would increase your capacity to take in more polluted air. Yeah, exactly. So it was really things like that. Like, as long as, while the government are figuring out how to reduce emissions that causes air pollutions and affects people's health, let people know. So give them the knowledge, give them the power to be able to make decisions for themselves. So having that at the back of my mind is a way of just, going through it and working it out. Yeah.
Yeah. So, it's good to hear you talk about, the motivation behind you pushing through the obstacles you faced. That's PhD. So PhD, you do something that is new. It's a problem-solving endeavor, and so if you don't have the motivation, you are not going to be able to scale through the problems. And yes, sometimes, you spoke about getting in touch with the agency, and sometimes it doesn't just work through emails. So you have to get personal and have discussions face to face before things can go through. So good to hear that part, and I think it helps. Do you want to add something to that?
Yeah, I want to add something to that, and I think it's also important that as people who are studying in the diaspora, doing some work, we should also be more aware of avoiding doing the helicopter type of research where you're in another country and you are making all of the decisions and all of that, the people who need it, the people who you're doing the work for, need to be brought to the table. They should be at the discussion. They should be involved in the discussion. So going to South Africa, I was supposed to do more than talking to them. I was also supposed to work at the stats office, where I would use an air-gapped computer to use their mortality data to do my work, because they weren't going to give me the data outright, like send it to me via email. It was not allowed. But that was also a setback, because I couldn't do that. And I already took 3 months out of my time to be able to do so. It's one thing you can plan, but would the plan come accordingly? Not quite. But going to South Africa to speak to the agency, absolutely necessary. I was happy to do it, because they're the ones who in the future are going to adopt it. So we need to be able to know what are the potential problems we should be aware of on why you would not want to take on this work. And, from speaking, you understand it needs to be accessible. It needs to be understood. So the work, even though my PhD is 170 pages long, if they get just the third paper, it captures everything they need to know. Right. So, yes, of course, plans do not always work out, but we also need to avoid doing helicopter research where we are not on the ground working with the people who actually have the data, whose resources we are taking advantage of or using, because it is the South African data, and I'm using it for my PhD. There's some benefit to me, but the people who are benefiting from it as well should be part of the decision making.
Yes. That's right. I think it's a paradigm shift. Currently, maybe if you are in Switzerland and you are doing research in Africa, you'll be required to have people on the ground, even who are actually involved actively in your research endeavor. So, of course, when you go to the disability community, they say nothing about us without us. So if you are doing research in Africa or South Africa, then you should involve them.
Absolutely.
If they are not involved, then it is not for them or about them after all. So that's interesting. Also, just to highlight, you said sometimes you can make plans, but then when you are making these plans, you do not consider the barriers you will face later. So we just make very smooth plan, but then it is when you begin to tackle the steps one by one, this is when the barriers begin to show, and then this is when you can again reconsider and plan as you have done so. So then let's go a bit deeper. So after you've done your research, collected the data, how was your writing? Because in PhD we write a lot. We go to the field, you collect the data, you do literature reviews, you have to write your manuscripts, and then you have to write your thesis. So how did you go about writing? Have you ever been stuck writing? Did you face some challenges? Is there something you can share with us?
Yeah, absolutely. I think writing and getting stuck, those are two things that goes together. There are moments where there are days where the information flows and it's nice, and you're just typing away and typing away and typing away, and you're feeling good about it. And then there are days where you look at the computer and you're like, what is that? What did I write? This does not make sense. Was I even thinking when I wrote this? And then you have to start all over again. But I think having a good supervisor who keeps you on your toes is helpful. Because I had meetings with my supervisor weekly on a Monday, which meant every Monday I needed to show something. I need to show something. And you can't just fluff and faff around. You have to bring something, because you must remember, I'm here on a scholarship. Scholarships do run out.
Yes.
Money can run out. So this clock is ticking, and you don't want to overstay, because the moment you do, then finding other means of income can be difficult, can be challenging. That's not what you want when you're so close to finishing your PhD. So there are moments where I don't even want to write.
Yes.
And I don't write.
I understand that feeling.
And I go and sit by the Rhine and I watch the thinnies in the water and
the ducks swimming
around. And there are times where you go on a walk to get clarity and you don't get clarity, and you're just like, this work was unnecessary. I need to go back home and stare at that computer. But one has to, I always say to myself, write anyway, write anyhow. Write nonsense, write rubbish, but write.
Just write.
Just write.
Just put the words down.
Put the words down, because then you have something to edit.
Yes.
Then you can see where there are issues. And I sit back and I'm like, that does not make sense. And I ask myself, but what is the sense? And then we write the sense. And then eventually you start to tweak and tweak. And sometimes we are so close to the work. We're too close to the work. We're too attached to it that it takes an external eye to come in and see it.
Yeah.
But that does not make sense. My supervisor's favorite comment is, this is bizarre. And I was like, oh, what have I done? And when I see this is bizarre, I'm like, oh, Lord have mercy. Okay. What is bizarre about it? And then he helps me, he breaks it down. There's a disconnection. You said this here, you said this here. It's not making sense. You either stick to this or stick to that, or you find a bridge between the both of them. And then over time, you tweak the problem and you have your writing down. And then you send it to co-authors. They come back with their comments. But at that point, you've come a long way than when it was an empty paper.
Yes.
It was an empty screen. So, but of course it's difficult to just write, but it literally is just write.
It's the way you begin. I mean,
whatever.
I can relate, because sometimes I don't feel like writing, and I put the words together so that next time when I come, I have a place I can begin from. So I can relate to that. Just put the words together.
Just whatever it is.
Even if it doesn't make sense, grammatical errors, the content
just write
just
it.
write.
Yeah.
Because when you leave the manuscript and then you walk away and you come back, you always see it very differently, and then you can put more sense into that.
And sometimes I would put placeholders. Like I start my writing by saying what should go where. Because in my mind, I formulate it and I say, this is what the flow should look like. Of course, that's just the template I have for myself. And then I put the placeholders, even if it's just subheadings. Under here, I want to write about air pollution and health.
Yes.
But here, we need to start at a global perspective, work our way down to a regional place, work our way down to the country level, and then work my way down to the city, which means I need to target the literature accordingly, and then I bring that in. And then it comes down to practical steps of trying to wrap my discussion. Okay, what do I want people to remember when they read this paper? Because that's what you should be discussing. Or what was I writing in my literature, in my introduction, and said, this is the gap we're trying to bridge. This is the gap we're trying to fill. Then I will start with that in my introduction and say, given the current status quo of this topic in this place, this is what it says. But when I did the work, this was the result I found. And then we start to build up from there. Oh, this is what we found. But in other countries, this was what they said. Now we have to discuss, why is it so different in other countries? And then I just start to, the web starts to move that way back and forth. And over time, you have something to actually read and review and say, does this make sense? And when things do not make sense, you can identify it and say, let's fix that. Yeah.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much for sharing how you even outline your drafts before progressing. Nice. So, I mean, we've spoken about the challenges through your PhD journey so far. So, to ask, how did you take care of yourself mentally, psychologically, physically, your health? How did you take care of yourself whilst you were trying to navigate through these problems?
That's a good question. I'm glad you asked, because you remember I told you at the beginning that when I was doing my PhD, some of my friends thought I was just having fun. Yes. That's how I took care of myself. So
it looks like that, but yes, just to ask if
that's how I took care of myself. Yeah. I love traveling. I love social activities, social interactions. And so having friends was important. Spending time with friends was important. And as you can imagine, I left Nigeria when I was barely 19. So I'm 33 now. I'm fiercely independent. I like to just carry my bag and go. And I'm so grateful that I live in a country like Switzerland where it's connected everywhere. You can get a ticket to somewhere if you plan on time.
In the middle of Europe. So.
20 francs, you're already in Madrid. And, because now you're in Madrid, you're in a different space. It's la-di-da. Life is good. We're living L-I-V-I, and it's a good time. And so I did things like that. And I would try to explore Switzerland because I'm like, I'm here for the duration of my PhD. Let me understand my area. Let me understand where I'm living in. And so I started, when I first moved to Switzerland in 2019, I said to myself, okay, this country has, I think, 26 cantons.
Yes.
I want to see all of them. By the time I leave Switzerland, if I ever leave Switzerland, I want to say I visited all 26 cantons. And it's relatively doable.
Yes.
You plan, you have the SBB, you buy your day pass
and then
on time.
Just let them take you wherever.
And they take me wherever. And next thing you know, 2 hours later, I'm cruising on the boat. We're on the water, just cruising. And life is good. And it all only cost me, 35 francs? There was a time they used to sell the ticket for, you could buy tickets for 35 francs day pass, but now it's like 45.
If you buy it very early, then it's
if you buy it early,
cheaper,
I would go to Geneva, day trip to Geneva. I would go outside of Switzerland and stay in hostels. Now I don't do that anymore. It's 4-star hotels or 5-star. But there was a time where it was when you stay in an hostel and it was fun and you meet all kinds of people. And for a moment, your life is not just PhD. Because I thought to myself, I need to treat PhD as if it's a 9 to 5.
Yes.
I come in, clock in, do my work.
Do your job and then.
And there are days where it's not 9 to 5. There are days where you're doing 16 hours, barely surviving on 4 hours of sleep. It's extreme. And there are days where you don't even do anything at all.
So you have to find that balance.
You find your balance yourself. Exactly.
People don't sleep for 3 weeks just to write and then.
Yeah, I know people who I would come into the office at 8 a.m. They've not gone home. Yeah, and it's like, did you sleep here? And then eventually my time came. I was in the office on Sundays.
You also do same. So,
yeah, the same. So there's a cycle.
That's how it is.
That's how it is. Yeah. But the first few years of my PhD, I was having fun. I was barely in Basel every month. I was out every month. Travel, take the overnight train, take a flight, go to Colmar. I was busy. And people were like, are we doing the same PhD? I'm like, we are. We are doing the same PhD. You will see me in class on Monday. But trust and believe, this Friday, I'm out of town. You cannot see me. And there are days where you're just attending events. You go to jazz club. I like going to jazz club. And you go to rooftop. You buy overpriced cocktails and you look at the view and like, yes, this is what I'm working for. To a point where I would not be so bothered by the price of cocktails. I'm not there yet because it's bloody expensive in Switzerland. But the view is free. You enjoy the view. Take a look. And, that's how I took care of myself mentally because I needed to still be able to have fun. I still needed to be able to be an individual. I still needed to be able to say my life is not run by my PhD, which was good.
It's good. Yeah, so dear viewers, you heard that. So, during your PhD, I cannot relate.
Why not?
To be very honest, but we heard from Temi. So, just treat your PhD as, if possible, 9 to 5. Because some people just do it, and as you said, you don't sleep. But then, if you do it as like a 9 to 5 job, then you have a life afterwards. You close in the evening, you go relax, you travel, see places.
But
most importantly,
yes,
you can come in.
If we were to paint a realistic picture, it's not the same for everyone.
Exactly. So that's what I wanted to mention. Sometimes you just need to see friends and family.
Yes.
It's very important. The social aspect of it. Maybe you are not going to travel or go to the Rhine or be in the Alps or be on a lake in Geneva.
Can I mention?
Yes.
I know if my friends were to watch this ever at some point, there were times where I also had to isolate myself because I was like, this is the last lap. There's no gallivanting anymore.
Yes. So you have to get it done now.
I have to get it done. So there were times where I could not meet with my friends. I could not go on group trips. Even the Rhine, I was like, leave it. The Rhine will be there when I finish. It's always there. So there were times where I fully isolated myself. It wasn't always, rosy. And this was at the end because now this is the last push. It made sense. And I think all of my friends, almost all of them go through the same thing where there is that point where you need to bury your nose in the book and just write it out and finish. And then afterwards, we're celebrating. Life after PhD is so much fun. Yeah. You just have to...
boring sometimes. Maybe we can come to that.
I like to think of it as fun, but there is the moment where it's great. You're, doing all of the things, and there's the moment where you have to sit down and finish it. And after that, c'est la vie. It's good. Life is good.
C'est la vie.
Yeah.
J'aime ça.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Okay. Yes. So interesting to hear how you dealt with your social life. So thank you very much, Temi, for that part. So imposter syndrome, it's a major issue in academia. It doesn't matter your level, maybe master's, every aspect that concerns research or something else. So masters, PhD, professors. So we have this imposter syndrome. Have you ever experienced imposter syndrome during your academic journey, most especially during your PhD? If yes, how did you deal with imposter syndrome?
No.
Okay.
Me and imposter syndrome, we don't know each other. Listen, I know it exists. I know people talk about it, but I did not feel like an imposter. Because if I think about it this way, as an African woman, I did not come here because it was handed to me.
Yes, okay.
I had to work.
It.
It's not even fought, but I had to work for it. Like you said, I graduated top 5 in my master's, top 5%. Like, I had to put in the time and work for it, because I knew if I was going to go as far as I wanted to go, understanding the competition, understanding that the opportunities are somewhat less and less and less as you grow higher, you have to put in the work. So I didn't come here because someone was like, you want to do this? Yeah, come. No. I applied for countless of scholarships.
Fellowships.
And countless, so many. I remember I was living in South Africa. I was living in Pretoria. I would go to a cake shop called Chateau Gâteau in Mainland Mall, because they had good Wi-Fi, they had coffee, and they had cake. And I would sit there and type and come up with projects. I was like, I can do malaria project, please fund it. I can do air pollution project, please fund it. So many. And no, I didn't get all of them, but then I got 2. And that's how I came to Switzerland, because in Switzerland, if you're coming here for a PhD, it is helpful if you have the money, you have the scholarship.
For me, that's the number one.
Yes. So
criteria, the money first.
You have to have the money.
You are not going to be allowed here if you cannot prove
exactly.
That
and not every supervisor has the funds
yes.
to be able to take on a student. And so I didn't come here because I was pretending to be someone else or being an imposter. No. I came, I did the work.
You came as Temi.
I came as Temi. I came with my accolades. I came with everything. I presented. I applied like everybody else.
Did
I got in. I
went through the process.
Exactly. I had to be on Zoom calls with my supervisor before he could even take me on as a student. I had to write a concept note, refine my concept note with my master supervisor and say, please, you as a supervisor, would you fund a project like this? Would you take on a student like this? So I had to be dedicated and say, I want this. So when I came in, I was like, I have arrived. I am here. I'm going to do the work. Because again, if I don't do the work, I cannot pay ESCAS back the money. So
you have to do the work.
I have to do the work. So I did not have a moment to feel I was an imposter or anything. No, I earned it, and I am doing the work. And now I have a PhD. I have earned it. I did not. No, I did not feel like an imposter. No, and I defined my success according to what I wanted for myself. And so when it was all done and I was there defending my PhD for almost an hour, it was a moment of, this is it. This is all I worked for. So imposter, I could see. I don't know her.
Not.
I don't know her.
I mean, that's interesting. So we had other presenters here. For them, they look at what they have done in the past. But it is interesting to also see your perspective on imposter syndrome. So for you, you knew you did not get here as an imposter. No. So you had your track record, you had everything right, and you knew you could do it.
Yeah.
So maybe that could be another way of dealing with imposter syndrome. Maybe if I have one, I can say yes. So I applied, I went through the interview, I was picked as the best person for this position. So I am not, first of all, an imposter here. So just go do the job. So that's something we could add to how people could deal with imposter syndrome, if at any point they have one.
Exactly. Because like I told you earlier on, from my undergrad, I knew I wanted to do a PhD.
Yes.
So even my undergraduate record needed to be good enough to be qualified for a postgraduate degree. My postgraduate needed to be good enough for me to be able to qualify for good scholarship in my PhD.
Correct.
So I was meticulous. I knew what I wanted to do. I knew what I was going for. I am ambitious. I get that. And I need to be that way because some people, things get handed to them. Good for them. But there are people
others,
like myself where
you have to work.
You have to work. You have to grind. So I couldn't have done all of that to end up here. And then someone says, I'm an imposter. Say, well, no, I'm sorry. You're talking to the wrong person. It's not me.
Yes, I understand. I mean, so you started with the end in mind. That's the only way you can prepare properly if ever you are going to do your PhD. Maybe it could be the same for me as well. So during your bachelor's, you progress to a certain level. You cannot just, be joking around during your bachelor's because you need to get some marks.
Yes.
Some marks that are enough to get your admission to master's and even for PhD. So you have to know way before. So it's a good way to prepare also. So maybe when you are very well prepared like that, then imposter syndrome, you can have a better way of going around it as you have done. Okay, so even though you have not felt imposter syndrome, like as other people would report, for you, what or how was progress like? What did progress look to you? How did you know you were progressing during your work? How did you know?
PhD?
Yes, during your PhD. Okay, now I'm progressing. I'm not late. This is an additional work, so I am getting there. How did that look to you? How did you know that you were progressing during your PhD?
I think for me, first understanding what the requirements are from the university and my institution. Yeah. So it differs for people. For instance, for me to be able to defend in the Faculty of Medicine, I think one article at least must be published. Yes. But then you have your supervisor who says, actually, I need you to publish all of them. Or I need
So not the minimal requirement.
Yes. So there's a minimal requirement and there's your supervisor's requirement. And my supervisor was like, I need you to publish 2 and 1 should be submitted by the time you defend. That's ideal. And you see, the thing is, it might sound like it's tough at the beginning, but considering the fact that I don't want to be a PhD for the rest of my life, I don't want to be a student there's life to be lived. I don't want to be stuck with PhD salary forever. Yes. I also want to go make big money. So I had to be able to see that point from where my supervisors come in and say, okay, I just need to put together all 3 papers by the time I want to defend. And then I can defend and I can move on to the next stage of my life, which is find a job and all of that. So progress for me was, how many papers do I have? I want to defend by this time. I should have published this paper. I should have published this paper. So I think in 1 year I published 2 papers. And then I was like, okay, good, we're on the right track. And the third one was the one that, loads of work, refine and all of that. And that was when I had to push and really, really push very hard because now I did not want to stay longer than I needed to on my scholarship because I also saw how difficult it was to get extra funding. So progress for me was, am I doing things in line with what I and my supervisor had agreed upon? Because, when you start your PhD, you and your supervisor have to sign an agreement. Your ways of working, the expectation that is there.
You have the
milestones. Yes. There was annual review of progress reports. Yes. So all of those things, and you have to design your Gantt chart that says by this time I want to do this.
Publish this. I want to collect this data.
Yeah, exactly. So of course things do not go according to plan, and you have to adjust your timelines. But that's how I checked my progress, and knowing that for me to be able to defend, these are the requirements. It means, come on now, we have to work.
That's interesting. So. Yeah. Yes, you mentioned it well. You have your progress timeline. Mm-hmm. So a way of tracking your progress is once in a while checking if it's per quarter. After 3 months,
Yeah.
then you check, okay, did I submit the paper? Did I collect this data? So interesting. Let's talk a bit more about the funding, because it seems it was also a major determinant for how fast or quickly you wanted to finish your PhD. What advice would you give to someone about funding? Maybe from the beginning, when you want to do your PhD, how should they go about funding and doing their PhD if maybe they want funding to collect data from the field, go to conferences or any other academic trips? How should people approach funding for their PhD?
I think all of this starts from the very beginning, because if we do acknowledge the fact that as you want to study a PhD, you're not the only one, but now the resources are less, so the competition is fierce. So it starts with, what kind of projects do you want to do? And identifying the supervisor that wants to take you on as a student to do that project. Because if you get a supervisor's buy-in, that's half of the problem solved. If your supervisor is with you and say, I want to put my name on this work, they will work it out with you. And that's how my supervisor and we got to work together. And so he was even the one who told me about about ESCAS.
Okay.
Because I initially applied for another scholarship, which is Global P3. It's an EU co-funded scholarship, but that required you to have a matching fund from another scholarship.
Okay.
And then he said, apply for ESCAS. So with these two, I can take you on. And my supervisor made it clear, I am retiring, so you're going to be my last student, which means I'm not taking on any project that has funding and all of that good stuff. So then we have to really figure this out. Yes. So I had to write a good concept note of what I wanted to do. So I had to have a clear, not fully clear, but a good idea of what I wanted to do and be able to present that to someone else to get their buy-in. And so once that was done and he was interested in the work, meant apply for the project and the funding and all of that. And then I came to Switzerland only when those were secured. But the thing is, there's some projects that already have a fund. So SNSF it's funded. Yeah. So there are moments where there is an application for PhD to apply. In those cases, you apply like it's a job, like anybody else, and you say you can do the job, and that's fine. And then there are also universities that support. So you were talking about conferences and wanting to do extra things. I know University of Basel, I think they provide 1,000 francs. I don't know how much it is now, if it's more during the time of your study, where you can tap into that fund to either take a course somewhere else or to be able to go for a conference. So there is those funding. And I also know that you have to make good networks and good relationship with people even while you're doing your PhD. Speaking to other students is how you get more insight into what is possible. And even speaking to other supervisors or even the administrator of your program to say, actually, you can also apply to the Canton of Basel.
Yes.
The Canton of Basel also offers 6 months or however amount to help students. So knowing all of those information is helpful to know how to identify the funding that you need for yourself. But you have to have something people want to buy into.
The project.
The project. Idea. It starts with you, and you iron it out properly with your supervisor. Because if you have your supervisor's backing, I cannot emphasize this enough. Having the right supervisor will take you far. Yeah.
Interesting. Yes. So, just to touch a little bit on speaking to people, because there are some scholarship opportunities we do not know of. So you have to speak to people, like the one with the Canton of Basel started. I once heard someone has to speak to someone from there. It is not advertised, and
it is actually on their website.
That is very interesting, because someone from my institute had to maybe speak to someone working there. So if it's on their website and I don't speak German and stuff like that, so it may not be something that's out there. Many people know, but the point I'm trying to make is you have to just speak to people about funding opportunities. And so the ones that you are not aware of, they can
tell you about
they can tell you. So just to also go back a little bit, you applied for, you said one was funded by the EU. So
Marie Curie,
yes. Yeah. And then you have to get an additional funding. How was that? I think Marie Curie is very competitive, and how did that go? How did you also find out about Marie Curie?
I found out through my master's. When I was in my master's, one of my lecturers who actually taught me about mental health, she knew about it. And from that scholarship, you have to find someone who will become your supervisor. And so she said, my supervisor, my PhD, was an external examiner for one of her PhDs. And so she made that connection.
So that's
that was the EU one. And then he said, what do you actually want to do? And so because I had my concept note of what I wanted to do with my PhD, sent it to him. He said, this is a good idea because it's also something I've been thinking about. So we structured it in a way that he has the understanding of how people fund projects. I'm still in South Africa. I don't know. And then we tailored it well to be able to apply for that scholarship for Marie Curie. And then after that, the same one was what I used to apply for ESCAS.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Interesting. So you've spoken about professors and supervisors, how they have helped with funding so far, but tell us more. For you, what makes a good supervisor? I mean, we've heard the funding part of it, but then let's go a little bit more on the supervisors. It's like you've really had great help from them regarding funding and then tracing your path to finding the financial funding your research. But then what other aspects make a good supervisor? Tell us.
Oh la la. Okay. What makes a good supervisor?
Yeah.
I would say a good
And how do you choose one for someone who wants to go into academia? How do you know? And then, yes, for you, what makes a good one and how can you look out for one as yours?
Okay. All right. First question. Let me answer the first one.
Yes.
I think a good supervisor is one who takes your interest as importantly as you take it, who sees what you want to do. Because that's where you have to be honest with them. I want to do this work. This is what I see for myself. And they buy into your interest and they take it on as though it's their interest as well. And I think a good supervisor is one whose duty does not just stop at the academia side, but also brings in the humanity of it all. Because there are going to be moments where life is going to transcend, we're reading paper, we're doing analysis, where there's going to be life problems and you need support. Your supervisor is your first point of contact. So, and then there's some supervisors who just want to keep it purely professional. It's just the work.
Very far, but
it's like, no, you need to be more than a supervisor sometimes. You need to be, what's the word? Not a close confidant, but someone you can go to and say, I need some advice. I'm having family issues. I need some time off. Otherwise, that could compound your problem where you have other problems or other issues outside of your PhD and you're not getting support. So that's where you need supervisors who know how to be humans. And you need a supervisor who knows how to tailor their supervision according to the student. There's some who they're set in their ways. It's this way or no other way. And there are others who say, how do you like to work? What do you like to do?
Your working style.
Your working style. Let's work with that. And a supervisor who actually understands where you're coming from. They don't need to know everything about you, but they have to know that, okay, you've come from South Africa, you've come from Nigeria. This is a new country for you. You're going, as much as you need to do your PhD, you're going to also need to find a way to integrate.
Yes.
A good supervisor is one that tells you how or shows you or encourages you to integrate. My first year, when I moved here, my supervisor gave me a first-class ticket to anywhere, like a train ticket. He said, I have to go to this conference, but I'm not going. Do you need it? He sent me an email. I was like, absolutely, I love traveling. I'll take it. And then I went to Montreux and Vevey, and I was like, this is wonderful. And so you need a supervisor who is kind, who is kind. I cannot emphasize that enough.
Number one
And how do you
Very
find
important.
one?
Kindness.
Kindness. Because kindness will transcend, we're just working, you're just a student, you're African, I am European. Kindness will transcend that. Kindness is when they say, okay, put the work to the side, go and take some time off.
Rest.
Even though we have a deadline. If you are not right, if you are not fine, this work cannot move, because I'm not going to do the work for you. But you need to get your mind right and be able to do the work. So you need a supervisor who is kind. Because a supervisor who is kind will know when to step in, will know how to step in, will know how to help you. And how do you find one? It's not, there's no one way to it. You can find one while you are attending a conference doing your bachelor's or your master's, and you keep in touch with them. But a good supervisor is one where you are very much aware of their work. You know the work they do. You've seen the breadth of their work. You know what kind of things they do. You can even watch their conference presentation or speech on YouTube. I watched my supervisor on YouTube. I was like, okay, I like what he's talking about. This is cool, right? And then you could also reach out to their former students via LinkedIn and say, I am looking to approach this person to be my supervisor. Did you enjoy working with them? Is there something I should know? Is there something you can share that would be helpful for me in when I approach them to be successful in, getting them to be my supervisor? Speaking to other students is how you know if you actually want to work with a supervisor or not. Because then they tell you, oh, his style of working is this way. Yeah. And then you know beforehand, is that something I want to take on? What you're getting yourself into. So conferences, even the work you want to do. If you want to study cancer, you know there are some people whose names are always in those papers when it comes to cancer studies. You look into them, you do more research into them, you look at where they're coming from. And sometimes you find that they've also been on a podcast like this. Yes. And you listen, so your research has to go deep into those places. You find that they've been on a podcast like this. You understand what their values are. You find that they've also been in an interview and it's on YouTube. You watch that and you see how they speak. You see what they say. You listen to what they say, and it gives you an idea of who you might be working with. Of course, the supervisor interviews you, but you must also interview your supervisor. And I know people don't do that, but it's not like an interview, but you ask them, what do you expect from your students? What do you look out for?
They even give you the opportunity to ask them questions.
And you must ask
so you
questions.
Should ask
you
one.
should ask
you
one.
You should ask one.
Yes.
Ask them how they supervise.
Yes, ask them how they supervise.
Yes.
Absolutely,
so,
yeah.
Yeah, that's nice. So you mentioned before that maybe you had weekly meetings with your supervisor. Mm-hmm. So do you like micromanagers? So supervisors who micromanage you, or the ones who leave you alone to just do your thing and report to me? How do you deal with that?
So the weekly meetings came about because I spoke to another student who, a very good friend of mine, he was struggling with his own supervisor. They were meeting like whenever they met, or and that. And I was like,
okay,
fam.
That's independence.
Yeah, I was like, fam, listen, this work, it's a great work. I had an idea, but to now do it, I'm going to need more than when I see you. We're going to need to be structured. And it was good for us to be structured because, like I said, he's retiring. Yes, so I could not go beyond a certain time so because he also has his own timeline. So it was about being consistent and keeping me on my toes. It's not about micromanaging, because the way my supervisor worked was also the thing where, don't come to me asking me to help you if you have not tried to find all of the answers, which sometimes would take forever. But then I would go to him and say, I have tried A, B, C, D. I've tried everything, but something is not right. And in 15 minutes to 30 minutes, we have figured it out. But he wants to see that I also tried.
You have to try.
You have to try. So it was not micromanaging. I was independent. I would say, I actually have started writing the second paper. And he'll say, no, actually, because of the state of your first paper, it's bizarre. You need to finish that first paper and leave the second one. Let's finish this one, because if you get better at this, you can finish that one. Because I was trying to do multiple things because, again, timeline wise. So it wasn't micromanaging, and I was independent, and that's how I like to work. Because, again, it is my work. It's my name. I'm the first author on that. So if someone steps to me and says, explain to us how you did this, I should be able to answer those questions. And my supervisor will be able to say, yeah, I support what she said because I was there when she was doing the work.
there.
But it's my work. I need to take ownership of it. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. So, that's not to say weekly meetings are sort of micromanagement.
No.
Yes,
No.
but it's just a style of how you also want to work.
Yeah.
For instance, my supervisor told me, so PhD is you are an independent researcher
Yes.
in some sort. So we are not going to spoon feed you.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to go look at it and
Yes.
try to find answers.
Yes.
It is when you don't find them, we are not going to leave you alone
Yes.
to do whatever you like, but
Mm-hmm.
it is after trying that you don't find your answer, and then you come to us, and then we are able to help you.
Exactly.
So whether you are micromanaged or not, it's a PhD, so you have to go.
Yeah. Because sometimes your supervisor also doesn't know all of it.
Exactly.
But they know the people who know.
Yes.
But it's when you come to them and you say, oh, I'm having a problem with the imputation of all of this data because we have missing data. Then they bring someone else into the meeting. You know that meme of...
Always.
You know this meme of the lion cub and the lion behind it?
Yes.
That's me when I send emails.
Okay.
CC my supervisor and things get done. Because they see his name in the email like, oh, okay, he needs help with this. Yeah. And it moves forward quicker, but he wants to see that I have tried. So, yeah.
Yes, so, yeah, it works like that sometimes. So when you are blocked, you just ask, and then they're able to direct you. As you said, what will take you 1 month to learn from start.
Yeah.
He or she can just figure it out with you in just a few minutes' time. So, yeah, interesting to hear your style of, your aspect or your views on style of supervision. So during your PhD, did you get a chance to speak to many other people about your research? Maybe not only during conferences. Did you feel any loneliness regarding your research topic? Did you get to speak to others, not only family members, but then did you reach out? Are you able to reach out? Because some people feel this, you are doing your research. Friends and families, it's not only research you will talk about, or even sometimes you don't discuss your research at all. How did you talk about your research? Sometimes it's good to discuss with people not in your field so you can get more. How did you also address that part?
So I also was in the environmental exposure unit where there was weekly meetings, or is it bi-weekly meetings? And it's where people would talk about what they're currently doing, which conferences they're preparing for. So I got to know the people who were also working on environmental epidemiology. Not precisely my work, but they were working in those spaces. And I had a very close friend, Shay, and we weren't doing exactly the same thing, but there were some similarities where, for instance, I had to use satellite data, Era 5 data, to do some multiple imputation on my air pollution data set. And so on that level, we were able to share knowledge on how to go about it. And also, sometimes the people we speak to are not limited to the people in the university. It's also possible you met someone at a conference, but they are in another university in Lausanne. You reach out to them and say, I saw your work on this and that. Can we discuss it? And conferences does help because you see other people who are doing your work and you can reach out to them later. Yeah. I was reaching out to professors in Harvard and in Canada and saying, I saw your work on this. Can you please, I'm having an issue with this. Can you please enlighten me? So I was able to speak to people in my institution, outside of my institution, my friends. Sometimes even just talking about the problem out loud is helpful because then you hear yourself and you're like, I can try this. And you're like, thanks for listening. Sometimes it's just for someone else to listen, not because they want to give you a solution, but to listen.
Just to listen,
it helps.
Yes, it helps. Then you can actually get other perspectives, but then hearing someone. Okay. Yeah. So thank you very much. You said after PhD it is fun. How fun is it, or how has your life been so far after your PhD? Do you miss research? Do you miss going to talk about your research in conferences? Or how much of a fun is it?
I sleep different. I sleep different now.
I mean, this is the last question, so
yes,
so it's a bit...
okay, so I mean,
just feel free and tell us what.
Now I have headspace to think about something else that I'm interested in and speaking to other people in those spaces and just exploring more avenues. Of course, I miss research. I still want to be able to do research, but I also want to do other work that is not just limited to research. Yeah, life is just a bit different now. It's not, I don't have a paper to write. If I'm reading articles, it's because I want to read articles, because I want to stay in the know. But it's fun. I sleep different. That's so important.
That's very important. You sleep
I sleep
different. I
different.
can't wait to sleep different.
And I meet up with my friends. Social life is different. Everything is different. And the horizon is, it feels like you're getting closer to something. There's more inspiration to do other things and to explore other avenues, because life does not end with PhD. It's only like, it's nice. You do your PhD and then there are other things to explore and
in life,
other things to do. And it's just, it's different. It's fun.
Thank you very much
My
for coming here. And I think the interview was very nice and very informative. And we hope to have you here again to discuss more into details in one of the issues.
Oh, okay. Because I'm like, what else could I be saying?
So thank you very much.
My
Thank
pleasure.
you very much, viewers, for staying with us up till now. Today's interview was about Temi, and then we hope you enjoyed it so much. Thank you very much. And see you in our next video. Bye-bye.
Bye.